Okay, hey, we're gonna talk about World War One here, and let's get going. All right. So, anyways, the World War One can really be traced back to one simple event. It's the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, who was a mid-level monarch in Europe. He was Archduke of Austria-Hungary. He was next in line to take over the throne of the Austrian Empire. And Austria at that time had an empire that extended into the Balkans, and they controlled an area today known as Bosnia. And they were having some problems. Bosnia is full of what would be referred to as Bosnian Serbs. Serbs are a race of people very similar to Russians. I think like Ivan Drago, big, strong, big dudes like Ivan Drago from Rocky Four, right? And the Serbs won independence from Austria-Hungary, and they've watched the Bosnians won independence, and they probably won a unified Serbian state. And so next to well, I guess a nation for Serbs is what I should say, right? And so next to Bosnia is the nation of Serbia, which had recently won its independence from the Ottoman Empire. And so the Bosnians are looking at them as inspiration. And they see this visit on June 28th, 1914, of Archduke Franz Ferdinand as a way to kickstart this. And so there's a group of gentlemen that get together, a terrorist organization that lay a plot to kill the Archduke. And when they ultimately are successful, it kickstarts World War One, and the war's going to last 4 years, and it's going to kill somewhere between 10 to 20 million people, and it's going to destroy much of Europe and involve all the world. That's the simple explanation. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand is going to lead to a chain reaction, but it's more than that. It's a huge buildup of really four main factors that are going to lead to the First World War. And we use the word MAIN as an acronym. Historians love acronyms. MAIN. And so the M of our acronym stands for militarism. And so if you remember from our last lectures, this is right after the time, or this is during the time of the height of the Industrial Revolution. And so like the world has changed quite a bit from 1814 to 1914. And 1814, the War of 1812, you have handheld muskets, you have, gallant charges, Francis Scott Key in America. The War of 1812, what I'm talking about in America is, this kind of a gentleman's war where the British and the American colonists fight. And, it's about bravery and standing up for what's right and whatever. But by 1914, all of that's gone away, and it's more of a war is going to be more about who can produce the most war goods and who can produce the most industrial means of destruction, I suppose. And so from 1870 to 1914, Europe has had this long period of peace, but it doesn't mean like the military is just like taking a break. They're building up. They begin to modernize. You start to see, the Maxim gun come into play. Guns are going to be mass produced. Boats are going to be mass produced, made out of iron. They're going to be stronger. Cannons are going to be stronger and stuff. And just the ability to mass produce items of war is gonna change the course of what Europe's going to look like. Armies are going to get bigger and better equipped. You can look there at our little chart. Britain is going to increase military spending. France is going to increase military spending. Russia, not so much, but they have this huge 1.5 million person army. And Germany's modern force, they recently had united in 1870 under a common leader, all the little German states and Prussia, and they're starting to be a global player. In Austria-Hungary, although out of all these, Russia and Austria-Hungary are probably the two that don't modernize as well. Still major forces, right? Half a million troops. And so for this 40-year period, all the generals in Europe have been sitting around trying to figure out how they're going to fight this next great war in Europe. The last war that we had was the Napoleonic Wars or the Prussian Franco War of 1870. And so from 1870 to 1914, there's no major conflicts. And European generals, they got to justify their job. And so they make up plans for how they're going to invade a different country. If you would go into the CIA or the Army files and the Pentagon, I guarantee you, even though we were at probably one of our best allies in the United States is Canada. We probably have contingency plans on how we would invade Canada, or the United States and England have been allies really since this time. I'm sure that we have a contingency plan on how we would attack England if we go to war with them. So every nation has plans in place when war breaks out, and Germany's no different. Germany's is their plan is going to be really what's going to lead to this war. And you can see there on your left, that's General Schlieffen. And he spends his entire life basically making a plan for how Germany can fight France and Russia at the same time, and avoid a two-front war. And so he comes up with these ideas, and his notion of the Schlieffen plan is going to be what's actually put in place and begin the fighting of the Second World War. Or I'm sorry, the First World War, the fighting of World War One. Okay, and so as nations in Europe begin to invest in resources, war resources, militarists, people in the military, start to call for military outcomes to diplomatic problems. And most of that military, most of this military rhetoric is focused outside of Europe, because these countries are going out and they're setting up colonies all over the world, and so they're using those military sources to do that. But when we have this geopolitical crisis break out in June of 1914 with the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, these militarists are going to call for a military solution to this political problem. Right. And if you just think about that, like if you spend all your time training in a like martial art or something, and all of a sudden you have an opportunity to get in a fight, although martial arts teaches you to avoid conflict, you're probably going to at least have that in your back pocket to know that you can fight if you want to. The next thing that's going to lead to this, and our main acronym, is alliances. And so European countries really for a long period of time have formed alliances to create a better balance of power. If you look at Germany here on this map, the German Empire is sandwiched between Russia and France, and those are the two main powers, or your four main powers on the continent of Europe are going to be France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. Well, Germany and Austria share a lot of similarities, and they're going to be allies. And so Germany had always tried to form some kind of an alliance with Russia to ensure that they never have to fight a two-front war. Well, in the late 1800s, the German relationship with Austria-Hungary kind of forces the alliance system between Germany and Russia to fall apart. And Russia ends up joining France in an alliance in which, if Germany fights Russia or Germany fights France, they're going to fight the other person as well. So if Germany goes to war with Russia, then they're going to go to war with France. Well, we also talked about all these little nations down here, like Serbia or Romania, Bulgaria, whatever. These nations are going to be different than some of these areas. And so the Serbians are full of Serbs, obviously, right? And so Russia and Serbia have this kind of cultural ethnic link. And so the Russians see themselves as the protectors of Serbian culture and the Balkans. And so Russia has an alliance with Serbia that if Serbia goes to war with anybody, that Russia will support them. And that alliance right there, and the fact that Germany and Austria-Hungarian Empire have an alliance, is going to lead us to this domino effect that's going to result in the First World War, right? Germany's bordered by, we just kind of all talked about that. England is off to the side here on this map, and interestingly enough, England gets drawn into World War One not because of German and French conflict or German and Russian conflict, but because Germany or Britain had signed a peace deal in the 1700s with the Belgians. In fact, basically stating that if Belgium was invaded by either France or Germany, that England would come to their defense. Well, that's going to drag England into the war. We talked about Russia being the protector of Slav culture. So all these alliances are going to play into this. Imperialism is also important. If you look at this map, here's the British Empire during that time frame, and you can see Britain had expanded into Africa, Australia, India, bits and pieces of China, over here in Canada. And so powerful nations in England and Europe, like England, are able to go worldwide to set up their empire. France, also in Africa, bits and pieces of the Caribbean, Madagascar down here with King Julian. Bits of French Indochina, modern day Vietnam, belong to the French Empire. The German Empire is relatively late to the game. Again, they don't unify until the 1870s, but you can see Germany down here in Africa and Papua New Guinea and South America, different places, right? But then you look at the Russian Empire right here. Now it's huge, right? Pink is the Russian is Russia, but also you look at their empire. It's pretty close to home. Like their empire, their colonial imperialization really only extends barely past their border. And you look at Austria-Hungary, it's kind of the same thing. This is their empire right in here, and they control Bosnia down in here. And so you look at these more powerful nations, and they can go outside of Europe to colonize, and the less powerful nations like Austria-Hungary or Austria-Hungary or um, Russia are forced to stay at home. And so when you stay at home, there's a lot more competition over those resources, right? And so then ultimately you also have nationalism, which is our last letter of the acronym nationalism, MAIN. Nationalism is just this idea that, maybe people of of similar cultures and languages and ethnic backgrounds should be unified under some sort of a nation, and not necessarily just in support of a distant monarch. And so you get this idea of the Serbs in Bosnia, and the Serbs in Serbia over here, and maybe even Albania, all these places in the Balkans. Why couldn't you have a Serbian like a Yugoslavia, like a unified Serbian state, or a unified Slavic state in which they don't have to support a monarch in Austria-Hungary. And so these are this idea of self-determination and the ability to unify a group of culturally similar people begins. And this is our idea of nationalism. And so all of these movements, this pro-German movement, pro-Slavic movement, kind of gets caught up. And so Bosnia is a little bit in the middle, and they're going to follow they're going to follow kind of the example of Serbians that have kicked off their control from the Ottoman Empire. So there we go. Basically, our war breaks down into this. You have your central powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary, and you have your triple entente of France and Russia, and eventually Great Britain, that are going to join and fight this war. And so because of this small shooting, and the buildup of military and this creation of imperialist states and this series of alliances and this birth of nationalism that actually leads to this shooting, we're going to have this war break out. And so that's going to be the causes of the First World War.